Let's get spooky with the Paranormal series. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Starting approximately 5 years ago, Fender decided they wanted to change things up. Fender USA introduced the Parallel Universe, then the Fender Mexican Alternate Realities, then we had another dosing of Fender USA Parallel Universes, until we finally got the Squier Paranormal series. So Alternate Reality, Parallel Universe, Paranormal, it gets pretty crazy, but it matches the theme. These are fun, quirky spec guitars that are available in a wide range of budgets. But the ones that always interest me the most out of these series are like the baritones and the tenors, but today we're looking at a 12 string. So let's go ahead and check this thing out. Wow. This, for some reason, feels a lot bigger than I was expecting it to be, and it's got a very considerable chunky weight to it, but you've got that beautiful Lake Placid blue finish and this giant Fender hockey stick style headstock. I was kind of shocked to see that these do not include a gig bag. They just ship them in the box with some protective material, but we've got the mint green pickguard pairing with our pure white pickups. And normally you do not find Jazzmasters in this configuration, and out of all the Fender guitars, it's Telecasters and Jazzmasters that are my favorite because these pickups just sound so great. So I'm curious to see how Jazzmaster pickups are going to sound in a 12-string variation. But of the second drop of the Squier Paranormals, they introduced this Jazzmaster 12. There's a Rascal Double H bass, standing for the double humbucker pickups that they've got. There's a Stratosonic. That one might be interesting enough to check out if somebody wants to new guitar day it. Also a pretty interesting custom Nashville Stratocaster, and a pretty sweet Esquire Deluxe. Now, the reason why the freaky guitars like the tenors, baritones, and this 12-string usually do the best out of these series is because it's generally hard to find relatively affordable versions of these guitars. Not everybody wants to drop $8,000 on a Gibson double neck or spend $4,000 on a Rickenbacker 12-string. So it can be kind of fun to add these things to your arsenal to inspire you to play a little bit differently, but without completely breaking the bank. I mean, these are at the stores for $449, so they're not necessarily throwaway money, but I will say it actually feels really good at this price point. I didn't expect it to feel quite this quality because you've got the whole gloss finish on the back of the neck. They're not doing satins anywhere. I mean, it's got the vibe of a higher end guitar. I guess we'll have to plug it in to see if it sounds like a higher end guitar. So let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take a look at its individual parts and specs. Disassembly took forever, but let's go ahead and look at these parts. The spec sheet calls this an Alnico single coil pickup. Here's what it looks like underneath it. It says JM51. And the back has some sort of a sticker, but unfortunately it's covered over by this foam block. And I was surprised to see that the screws that secure the pickup cover to it also have springs on them. So you've got double height and non-movement of pickups in here. And since you can't see anything on the back, I left this one as is, so you can tell that there's no floating back and forth. It's because it's extra secure by both of those measures. But to give you an idea, if you wanted to go with black covers, it would look something like that. But stock, you actually have a nice crisp white, which I really like the look of. I found it interesting that we had these textures on the inside. They definitely contrast against this mint green. And yes, this has its historical place, but I think a blinding white pickguard on this would look extra good too. And within the circuit, this pickup reads 11.3 k ohms, our neck position about half at 6.62, and the middle at 4.21. But our routes are pretty basic here, then continues on right there for our toggle switch, and this is all routed out for our controls to fit inside of. Which, speaking of our controls, here's our 3-way toggle. Stock from the factory, it moves up and down, that way you don't accidentally hit it as you're strumming. And then here's a look at the pots. Not exactly sure what the branding is on there, but we've got the June bug capacitors. And then the output jack. I'm going to make a comment that the solder work on it's not very good. That black wire there kind of scares me. One good little tug's gonna make that come off. But with our pickguard on here, we can see that we have clear white witch hat style knobs that match the white of our pickup covers. Then our output jack is located right here on the front. But now it's time to talk about the bridge. They called this a hybrid bridge. So I thought this would be like a Telecaster where you could choose to have them all be top loading or strung through the body, but actually you don't get any choice on this at all. One goes through the body, the other one has to be top loaded. You don't have the option of either or combination, it's only combination. So Fender sets these up as the smaller string first. And if you're not familiar with what a 12-string guitar is you have octaves. So it's the octave E, A, D, G. But then when you get to B and E, it's just doubles of the exact same string, which does make it sound incredibly different. But what's cool about this setup is if you want to adjust the intonation of just one, you have to loosen that screw and then set it where it needs to go, then tighten it down. But then this one over here, it's a little bit more traditional in you tighten or loosen this spring. The string heights are also a little bit different. And this design itself is secured with 3 screws down here and then 2 at the top. Can you imagine if they would have put a tremolo system on this? That's why this thing looks so strange, is it doesn't have the usual big Jazzmaster trem system. We also don't have the rhythm lead circuit. Might as well keep it relatively affordable. They're using poplar bodies on these, and let me tell you, there is at least 5 pieces to this body. For the most part, you can't see it while you're playing, but when I had this outside doing the B-roll, I happened to catch it at an angle where it just shows there's a bunch of tiny little strips throughout this. So that's one way that they're keeping the price down on these. But moving on from our poplar body, we've got the maple neck and the laurel fretboard. After conditioning it, this thing actually doesn't look too half bad. You can always tell laurel versus rosewood, just due to the fact that there's so much wood grain, and if you run your nail along it, you can really feel it. I like the chocolatey brown streaks within it. Then you get some interesting swirliness in this area. These are advertised at a 9.5 inch radius, paired with a 25.5 inch scale. Our synthetic bone nut measures 1.69 inches, increasing to 2.04 by the 12th. First fret neck depth is 0.82 and 0.91 by the 12th. That's a very slim C-shaped neck. It's got a good roundedness to it though. It's not exactly blade thin. Here's that neck profile at the first fret and the 12th fret. Just a nice C shape, but definitely gets wider as you go up. But now, moving on to our headstock. We've got that Squier by Fender Jazzmaster logo. This whole headstock on a Jazzmaster is just kind of funny to me. But this is not just any maple neck. Obviously, you're putting twice the amount of strings on here, so Squier wants to know that these necks aren't going to warp in a couple of years, so they've actually reinforced them with graphite. So how I imagine that going is when they routed it out for a truss rod, they also put graphite around there to strengthen the neck. I could be wrong on that. I'm not exactly sure how they did it, but there's graphite rods in here. And thank goodness our truss rod adjustment is right here and not at the base of the heel. Man, can you imagine? That'd be a big pain in the butt. I need a small tweak, but I've got to take all my strings off and that. Some of these tuners, I noticed when I was strumming it earlier, they rattle. So I'm betting it's some of these ferrules aren't the tightest of a fit. So that's what I would look at first if yours does a similar thing. But it's the vintage style tuners, poke it down, wrap it around, and we do have a retainer string tree for the top 6 strings. So your first 3 and last 3, they are not included within that. They just sit loose, but the other ones run through here, and that's just screwed onto the top. It kind of makes an unamused clown face. 2 eyes, a nose, and then just a straight mouth. And maybe he's got a mustache or something. Or if you round it off, it kind of starts to look like a skull dude. But now that I've got it strung up, I think I found what's making the rattling sound. It's actually the tuner tips. So if that really bugs you, you might have to put some dampening foam on them or replace them with different tuners. Moving to the backside, not too much to check out here. We've just got our string through ferrules, and we've got a comfort cut, strap buttons in our normal locations at the butt and at the top horn, and we have our Squier neck plate. Notice it doesn't say Paranormal anywhere. I wish it did. But then you have an untinted maple neck, and you've got lots of wood grain on this particular example, and the headstock is constructed in usual Fender fashion. So it might look like a volute, but that's just how the headstocks are constructed. And here's our Kluson style tuners, and these are being made in China, if that sways your decision one way or the other. I guess that also explains our price point on here, but it's designed and backed by Fender. And all said and done, it weighs 7 pounds, 10 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug this one in, and hear how Jazzmaster pickups sound with 12 strings. Alright, so first off, is it neck heavy? It's actually pretty balanced. Now if you're like me and you like to have it a little bit more joisted up, it does want to fall just a little bit to this position, and you definitely feel it in your shoulder that there's a lot of weight on this headstock. But so far, I would say it's good in that aspect. Now let's get our tones. Alright, so at 450 bucks, I think I've had my fun. I mean, if you're just looking for a 12 string in your arsenal, so far, it stays in tune just about as good as any other 12 string. If you lubricate your nut and stretch your strings, you shouldn't have too much troubles. I will say, it doesn't really sound much like a Jazzmaster. Maybe we threw some pure vintage 65s, my favorite Fender pickup set. Maybe then it would sound a bit better, but it's okay as is. The bridge almost sounds like a humbucker. Whereas the neck is a little bit more familiar. That might explain why the reading on this one was twice as much. Now I kind of regret not pulling that pickup out too. I just thought they were the same because that's what the spec sheet called it. But the middle position is where you really get some of those Jazzmaster-like tones. Now let's try some distortion. Now that we know all about the Squier Paranormal Jazzmaster 12 string, what are my final thoughts on this thing? Yeah, I had a good time with this. I think it's well worth the price if you were just looking for a budget model 12 string. Yeah, could you upgrade the pickups? But I don't think you necessarily need to right away unless you didn't like what you heard today. I would say the only weak point on this really comes down to the tuners, just with their tips being loose, not necessarily the tuning being loose. The only other thing I noticed is sometimes it takes a little bit for the tuner to grab the string, but that might just be some binding at the nut, or maybe it's binding on our string tree. So I wouldn't necessarily write these off as you have to replace them right away or anything. It's perfectly fine out of the box once you get it tuned and set up. Or maybe you just collect 12 strings and you just wanted a Jazzmaster body shape. I haven't seen one of these things before this series. So I had fun checking it out. I hope you guys did too. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.